We are here again with Mallory Leone, and we are going to be talking about folk magic and its connection to modern healing and tapping into your intuition, energy healing, manifestation, crafting your reality spells. We're going to go over all kinds of great stuff here. So welcome back, Mallory. Thank you.
Could I have done a costume change?
Yeah, you should have so, I think that it's kind of important for people to understand your story and how you ended up here. So if you could share a little bit about how you found yourself in the middle of this beautiful world of magic and witchcraft.
Yes, I love it. Okay, so I started practicing witchcraft when I was about 10. And I always tell people this was full on a response to watching some of the early 90s witchcraft movies and TV shows. But what it really was a couple of young girls trying to take their power back at a time when you're like prepubescent, preteen, when you really don't have a lot of power. So if you think about it, if you think about some of these kids that start to get into witchery at a young age, it makes so much sense in the context of they are right at the precipice of feeling more like themselves, exploring their sexuality, their bodies, who they are, but they have no control of what they're eating, their clothing. They're being sent to school, which is incredibly structured in ways that I don't even get me started. that take their identity and their power away. And so it's just the perfect timing. But since I got into it at such a young age, the connection to healing wasn't really there for me. It was just more about like doing spells for love, or I remember we did a spell to heal the bees, like bring the bees back. This was in the early 90s. So guys, let's get on this bee thing. We have some work to do still. And then I had a long period of time where I lost a lot of that. It was the same period of time that I lost a lot of myself, to be honest. It was like I was a shell of myself, and I was constantly looking for outside validation. My health just went into the toilet. And eventually, this was right before my Saturn return, which starts around age 27, 28. For those of you that aren't astrology nerds, it's just a time in your life when you begin to really come into your more adult identity and who you are and kind of how you'll be spending a lot of the next several decades of your life. And I found myself in a place personally that I just completely didn't identify with anymore. In my relationship, with my body, with my health, all of it. And that's when I started really picking up magic again. And it was just a few years later that I decided to do it professionally. I felt a real call to it. I tell the story quite a bit, but when I was at my lowest in my Saturn return, I actually had a really good paying job. I was engaged. I kind of had all of the things. And I was in a hotel room. I was traveling for work, and I was on the bed, and I just was doubled over in pain. I was crying. I was in fetal position. And I was like, what is wrong? What is going on? And I had a vision of myself in a white coat, and I was mixing tinctures and playing with herbs. And I was like, oh, I'm a doctor. And I got really excited and almost immediately started looking up different naturopathic medicine schools. And I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. And long story short, I ended up shadowing under a naturopathic doctor. Love her. We're still really good friends today. And after shadowing for a few months, realizing that I wanted to start studying nutrition. So I went and got a nutrition certification, worked in clinic with her for a little while longer, started to do a lot of science writing for a lot of nutraceutical companies. And again, it was like working with my own nutrition clients. It was the craziest thing. It was like looking from the outside in. They're doing everything right. They're doing everything I say. They're working with their doctors and nothing's changing. But then I would hear how this patient hates her husband. And I'm like, whoa, okay, let's back this up even more. And that's when I started to get into the energetics again. And then manifestation started showing up everywhere in social media. This was around like 2015, 16. And I was like, wait a minute, this is just witchcraft. This is hilarious. Like everyone's talking about manifestation and all these practices, visualization, working with crystals and candles. And I'm like, why aren't they calling themselves witches? This is so funny because this is what I've been doing since I was 10. And then the healing aspect really came in for me. I had an insane healing crisis in 2017. It was like maybe a second or third wave healing crisis, but it was the biggest one by far. And it was one in which my past, a lot of things that had to do with my childhood came up and relatives that were involved. And basically my family imploded. And to this day, I don't speak with a lot of them because we live in different worlds, which is totally fine. I've done a lot of healing around it. And that just pushed me further down this pathway of energy healing and living in between states of consciousness, living in between worlds, gathering information in these worlds that I can bring back with me to the physical plane, just widening my consciousness, expanding my perspective, until then I started offering it to other people. So I hang out in the liminal, I hang out in these different states of consciousness so that I can hopefully bring some intel back. And then also I like to teach people how they can tap into their own intuition, because that is also very important, right?
Yeah, I think that's an incredible story, and I love it. And what I heard is that it's a journey, right? Like there was no like one point and you were there, you like went there and there
it's
and
still
there,
going
there,
on.
and there. Right. Well, I love that. So you mentioned that you can bring this back to folks. So if someone wanted to start their own sort of magic practice,
Mm-hmm.
what can you give them some tips? How do they get started?
Yes. So I would say just reading about it, listening to podcasts, educating yourself on different types of magical practices, because there are many that span every single continent and every single culture throughout history. Really, witches they're shamans. So if we want to take it like way, way back, they were the seers, the healers, the wise ones. They were the ones communicating with nature, with the goddess, again, like bringing that information back and helping to disseminate it into their communities. So actually a really fun practice that I love is if you have 23andMe, or if you know a little bit about your history, your ancestral history, figure out what magical practices came from your people, your indigenous people from where you're from. So I have a lot of Southern Italian, I have some Finnish. And so like my Nordic roots are really strong, but my Southern Italian roots are really strong. So I would say that most of the magic that I practice and that I now intuit is from that part of the world. So that's a great place to get started. And I promise you, there's a book about it. If you can, if you can identify where you're from, there's a book about magic. There's Muslim traditions, Jewish traditions. There's hoodoo and curandismo are sort of a mishmash of folk magic that incorporates Catholicism and Christianity, and then the folk magic from South America or from places like Haiti. And so it's endless, the information out there.
That's fascinating. I love that idea, and I want to go look my books up. So how does we're saying folk magic? What is folk magic?
Right. So for me, and again, I'm not an expert on theology or history. And so there's probably an actual answer to this, but the way that I see it is that there's more hierarchical and codified systems of magic. So these are going to be systems of magic that have very strong and strict rules. And for me, folk magic has been more like, what are some of the practices, spells, recipes, and things that have just been passed down through the ages? What would my little old, great Nona, what would she have practiced? Would she have sang a little song over someone's hurt knee, or made a poultice, or chanted something, or intuited a message from the goddess to help her grandchild heal. In South America, it's very common for grandmothers to run up to a child that's been hurt, scraped his knee, and do like a little, like maybe like a little soul retrieval or something. That's very common there. And so that's folk magic to me. It's a lot of things that have just been passed down that just make sense. And they come without the rules and restrictions and dogmas that a lot of these practices can come with sometimes, that they've just never felt good to me. Totally cool if people practice those systems. I just don't.
Mm-hmm. You've talked about witchcraft and magic for subconscious reprogramming. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yay, I'm so into this lately because, again, it was sort of like the manifestation piece where I was like, wait, you all are just being witches over here. You're calling it manifestation, which is cool, but like you're just doing witchcraft. And now I'm starting to study a little bit more about hypnotherapy. I'm getting my own certification in it. And I'm, of course, trying to make the connection really hardcore between what I've already been doing and the subconscious reprogramming that I'm starting to learn a little bit more about from a scientific standpoint. But let me see if I can put this in a way that's concise. So you have an intention to change. And maybe that change is bringing in a new lover or bringing in some more money or getting clearer on your career or what you want in life. Maybe it's a health intention. And the intention lives in the ether. It's not yet here. And what magic always taught me to do is through the spell and through, which can really just be journaling. You light a candle, maybe you gather some energy in and maybe you're working with energy a little bit more. Maybe you're just working with energy through your herbs and your teas and your tonics. But when you start to use the spells, however you use them, you're starting to anchor your intention down into the earth plane, down into the physical. And when you start to do that, it teaches your brain that this thing could be real. This thing that is not yet real, that's up in the ether, could possibly become real. And so you practice and you chant and you sing and you drink your teas and you drink your tonics. And over time, those wires are reconfigured. And all of a sudden, this thing is real. And so to me, that's the connection that I've made, because I'm a bit obsessed with having made that connection. But, maybe hypnotherapists would argue with me, because it does get so much more complicated. And hypnotherapy is such a beautiful art form. And of course, there's other types of brain reprogramming. But for me, I love that connection of like bringing it down into the physical.
Well, it's crafting your own reality, right? And so you talk about spells, and I want a spell. I want you to walk me through one or two spells. Like, what do people want? They want love, they want money. What would you say is like what are your go-to spells?
Go-to spells. Okay, I've been getting a lot of love questions lately, so let's go with love. Okay, so a beautiful love spell would be, in magic, we work with sympathetic properties. So that could mean that something like a candle or a stone or an herb is meant to represent you as a person, and then maybe the person that you're trying to bring in. One major rule in any type of spellcraft that I teach is that this person you're trying to bring in cannot be a specific person. This cannot be Joe. This cannot be Mary. It has to be the essence of the person that you are ready to bring in. So that's first and foremost. We do not ever bend anyone's will. We do not change anyone's will. And you set the two candles on the table, and before even lighting them, you are going to get very clear on your intention. So one spell that I love is it involves writing down not just what you want from a partner, but how you want to show up. So if I'm like, ooh, I love like a wilderness man, like a really, like he fights bears, I think, and he eats bugs and whatnot. And then I'm sitting over
He
here
can
going,
fix a car. Come
he can
on.
fix and then I'm sitting over here going like, I don't even like, I like camping and stuff, but I'm not going to eat a bug. So why in the world would I call in a man whose whole life is being in the wilderness and being like a survival sexy bear man? Instead, by writing what I'm willing to do, how I'm willing to show up in a relationship, it makes me so much more clear on who I want. And then you can even do a third column. What do you want this relationship to be like? What's the energy of this relationship? You can get really, really granular with this stuff. So you set your petition, this is called your petition, aside. If you want, you can bring in different gods and goddesses as energetic backup to kind of help you on your way. And then when you light the candles, you have them, let's say 7 paces apart, maybe like 7 inches apart. And then every day you just move them 1 inch closer to each other every single day for a week. So you've got this sympathetic magic coming in. It is a physical representation of what you're bringing in energetically. And through that, it's also every single day you're showing up for that spell. Every single day you're showing up, lighting it, moving them 1 inch together, maybe saying a prayer, maybe an incantation, and really getting into the energy of what it would feel like. Maybe you read your lists again, whatever you feel like you need. So that's a really good example of a spell that I would do.
That's great. But you can do that with anything. It's really taking that time to sit there. And someone once said to me, it's that there's no proper way to do it. Your intention is what matters. So if somebody has an intention and they set aside time, then they're focusing on that, then that's all they have to do. Is there a cycle like the moon and that sort of thing? Are there certain things that we should be spelling on at different points?
If you want to if you want to get granular with it, you can. There is something called electional astrology that gets really deep and gets down to the minute that you're actually casting. But I don't.
What is that called again?
It's called electional astrology.
Okay.
And I don't practice it and I don't teach it because it stresses me out. And if you wanted to go a little bit more macro, just like zoom out just a teeny bit, you could do it with the moon cycle. So anytime the moon is, we just had a full moon. So now we are waning. So anytime the moon is waning back into the new moon or the dark moon, you can let go of things. So you would do spells that you would want to release emotion. If you're cutting cords or dissolving cord, I don't cut cords anymore, dissolve cords or transmuting energy that you had with an ex lover or a company you used to work with or a family member, you're going to release through that moon phase. And then when you get to the new moon and you're building up to that full pregnant, just fertile full moon, then of course we're going to be bringing things in. Over the years, I've played with this. Again, I think you're totally right. You focus on your intention and you're going to be good to go. But yeah, you could also work with the seasons. We're at the time of this filming, it's winter time. Winter solstice is actually tomorrow. And so there's a ton of magic you can do about leaning into the darkness of winter and then celebrating the light that is to come. So you just tap into the energies around you and you should be good to go.
So as you're talking, I'm thinking about that idea that this all sounds great and I love doing it, but sometimes I'm like, am I making this shit up? Is this even real? Can we talk about that?
Yes. My answer to that is, so what if you are? I think that it's so important for us to get in touch with our imaginations as adults. We lose so much of that. And I've gotten to the point where, especially in my, when I'm like in sort of alternate states of consciousness, if I'm opening the Akashic records or doing some sort of psychic or medium work, especially for a client, that's when I get really like okay, this is not a time to be making things up because you're working with someone here, like you're playing with someone else's emotions. So that's when I like to be really sure. But for the most part, if you're just starting out, who cares if you're making it up? Who cares if it's all fake? And then from like a more psychological perspective, whatever you're making up, quote unquote, it exists somewhere in your consciousness or your subconscious. So why not let it come forward and express itself, and then just get it out.
Yeah.
With it.
I'm a big fan of Joe Dispenza, and he talks about, where you place your attention is where you place your energy. So why not have fun with it, right?
Exactly. This is all supposed to be fun. That's the other thing.
Oh yeah, that thing. Like not being so serious about like, we're like, how do you make a spell? What do you have to do? Tell me exactly. But yeah.
Well, it can be scary because you read some of these books and it's like spirits and, don't do it. There are books. I have one, I won't name names. And I was like, this guy is super respected. And he talks about doing hours worth of protection spells before you even get to your spell. And I'm just like, this is not the paradigm I live in. Like, this is not what we're doing here.
Yeah.
I hope, it works for him.
Let's talk a little bit as we're wrapping up here about tapping into your intuition. And I was listening to your podcast, and everybody should listen to it. It's great. And you mentioned you can't unhear something that you hear. So can we talk about how do we tap in, and then just when you bump up against something you didn't want to hear?
Oh, this might be my favorite topic lately. I'm gonna get personal with this because I think it will help people. And I love talking about myself. I knew, so I was with someone for 5 years almost, and I knew pretty much the whole time that it wasn't going to last forever. And I chose to be in the relationship anyway, because I knew it was really good for me at the time and where I was and where he was. And it was good. It was really good. And the last, I would say 6 months or so, boy, did I really know. Like, I really knew that it was time. And I hated knowing. I hated it. And so I ignored it. I ignored it for as long as I possibly could. And this wasn't because it was a bad relationship. This wasn't because we fought. We didn't. We were completely awake and conscious with each other. It was a beautiful relationship. We still love each other to this day, which you can see why I didn't want it to end. But I knew it was time, whether it was an expiration date or time we needed apart, whatever it was. I hated that I knew it. And I see this happen all the time with clients where they will pay multiple astrologers, psychics, human design readers. They will pay hundreds of dollars to hopefully get someone to confirm that what they already know is not true. Because
Right.
they know. And there was actually it was Dr. Jolene Brighton told me, I'll never forget it. This was years ago. We were hanging out and she was like, your heart, wait, what did she say? Hold on. Your heart knew and your mind had to catch up. Your mind had to catch up with what your heart already knew. That it was something like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's the case for so many. And so there's a whole conversation that could literally probably be hours long of intuition versus anxiety, because I know that especially as women, and especially women, I think it's over 35, there is like a whole other level of anxiety that comes in. And this is probably just from years and years of stress, adrenal fatigue, and the corresponding hormonal disruption, right? It's like, of course, like, how are we going to trust our intuition? A, when we've been told our whole lives that it's wrong and everything we feel is wrong and we have no power. And then B, we have all this biological stuff come in. So if you're struggling with this, you are not alone, and it's just a muscle, and it's just a process, just like healing your adrenals is a process.
That's great advice, and it's so true, because I know that it can be a challenge to tap in and trust yourself. So as we wrap this up, in terms of intuition, spells, manifestation, is there anything in closing you want to share?
Gosh, I would say the one thing I love about spell work, and I still struggle with this myself, but they're very set it and forget it. That's kind of why I love them. When you start to get really manic and obsessed with bringing something in, that's when you know there's something a little bit off. When it becomes that like, well, why isn't it? Ugh. That can be a really good sign to step away. But the way that spells work, because you are raising energy and sending your power towards your intention, when you're done, when the candles burn out, when the spell bag, the medicine bag is, hung around your neck, put in the drawer, whatever it is, that's the energy doing what it's supposed to do. And then your only job is to really stay in alignment with your intention. So what does that mean? That means if you're trying to save up to buy a house, stop spending $150 a week at Sephora. Like stop buying stupid stuff.
Right.
So I think that might be the best part about this practice is it's like, oh, you just set it and forget it. And the energy's doing its thing. And then if it doesn't come for you, then perhaps it wasn't meant for you, or you can like reconfigure your intention. But for the most part, a lot of energy it's all going on in the background it's all happening for you.
That's fantastic. Well, again, Mallory, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. And you talk a lot about spells and magic work. I think you have some really cool classes. Can you share a little bit about those?
So I do have the magic school at fourcorners.studio /magic-school. But if you just go to fourcorners.studio, my main offer is something called Magic Lab. And it is pretty much everything that I've ever learned or taught on the subject of spell casting and magic and energy and different types of meditation. Pretty much everything is there. And there's a lot coming in 2022. So it's all there at fourcorners.studio.
All right. Well, thank you again, Mallory, and more to be continued.
Yes. Thank you so much. This was so much fun. So much fun.